Savage Nation. Let me just say this to you. Talk radio is about opinion. It's not a commercial for Donald Trump. It's not a commercial for a particular party. Talk radio is about opinion. No one owns me. Nobody owns me. I'm not a member of the cartel that controls radio and television. And let me tell you something else. Things are getting so controlled right now with the mergers, the AT&T. I don't know what else they bought. Soon Amazon will buy them all, and there'll be one company that runs America, including the U.S. military. I never heard of anything like this. But you see, this conglomeration of corporations is the death of freedom of speech. You may not understand this right now, but there is an antitrust division of the U.S. Justice Department that is dead. There's no one in there. It's fundamentally a crypt with nobody home. There's not been an antitrust action that I know of for years. Well, what's the point of it? How can you let one guy own everything? How is that even possible? Is that good for America? Don't call me on this. I'm not interested in it. I really don't even want to talk about it. I saw that in Germany, which is nationally controlled, the German TV bosses want to shut down conservative shows. There's a show there called Hard But Fair. It sounds like my show. But the scum that run the television shows in Germany are saying they're too conservative. They're too anti-Muslim. They should allow their women to be raped. They should welcome being raped by the immigrants. You know, 2 weeks ago in Germany, you didn't read it in the local papers because it didn't meet the protocols of the newspaper business. A 14-year-old Jewish girl was raped and murdered by an immigrant from Syria, a Muslim. And all hell didn't break loose because the Nazis, who are called progressives, who control the television shows, want the plug to be pulled on the nation's political talk shows for 1 year, arguing that their populist agenda has helped fuel the rise of the far right. You think we're far from that here in America? I don't. I don't think we're too far from that. Now, here in America, we have an immigration problem that hasn't changed much under Trump. We think it has. We hope it has. We pray it has. But has it? They're still pouring over the border. They're still sucking our social services dry. They're still melting us down culturally. So tell me how it's changed, no matter what we have said. And yet, at the same hand, being an immigrant son, I, Michael Savage, an immigrant son, the only one in major media who is an immigrant son, and I'm proud of the fact that I can walk in two worlds at the same time, the world of the immigrant and the world of the American. I asked myself, if I just arrived here, legal or illegal, how would I get started on the American dream? And I'm going to ask you today on the Savage Nation, if you were a new immigrant to America, what would you do to get started on the American dream? Some of them work really hard, and they're working on the American dream. But what would you do? What business would you go into? What would you get, a souvlaki stand in Manhattan? Would you become a gardener, compete with the other gardeners, one of whom might steal your truck and your tools while you're out doing a job and you're up in a tree? You're up in a tree and your pal that you hired, your own friend from your own village in your own town in your own country, steals your truck while you're in the tree and sells it and you have nothing. What would you do then? Now, how would you start in this country? How would you get to square one in America as you see limos zipping by on Fifth Avenue? What would that do to you? How would you begin? Where would you start? Would you become bitter? Would you become a criminal? Would you go into the underworld to say, I'm not waiting in line, I'm gonna do what I have to do? Now, many of you listening to the show are descended from immigrants. You may be one or two generations away from immigration, particularly in the big cities. Probably your grandfather. You can call and tell me those stories. But I don't really want to go there to the maudlin. I want to ask you, if you, the listener of the Savage Nation, just arrived in America, what would you do to get started on the American dream? How would you begin? What a country we're living in. How we've gone from a melting pot to a chamber pot is an old story of mine, but you know what? It hasn't changed very much. But on the other hand, let's look at we Americans. Been here several generations. We're real Americans. What does a pimp in Nevada winning an election tell us about our political system today? What does a pimp in Nevada winning an election tell us about America today? Another topic is, how has feminism warped father-daughter relations in the United States of America? Oh, is that a hot-button issue? That's the third rail of America right now, to say anything about feminism. But let me ask that question. How has feminism warped father-daughter relations in your family? Forget about America. Care to confess? Care to talk about it? And new immigrants, again, if you were a new immigrant, I'm not asking you if you are an immigrant. I'm asking you as an American who've been here. Your grandfather, your great-grandfather came here. What would you do if you just arrived on this shore, on the shores of this nation? How would you get started? Now, talking about the news, which I'm kind of bored of, Cohen to flip. I don't really care. If he committed a crime, let him do the time. De Niro bombs. Keitel's 14-year-old son is mugged of his bicycle. See, they thought, these guys, Cohen, De Niro, Keitel, these guys owned the city in their mind. They were New York City. And as they walked on the pavement of Manhattan, they thought the city pavement they walked on was set in stone. Instead, they found out they can feel the rumblings of quicksand are just below the pavement. Just below the pavement, they can feel the rumblings. The rumblings on the pavement indicate there's quicksand under their feet. Yesterday, they walked with assurance that their life was set in stone. Now let's go back to the fruity little song that I opened with. And I have no idea what you're going to call about. Just remember one thing before you play the fruity song. Here's one thing to remember. I am the underdog in national talk radio. Make no mistakes about it. I am not a member of the radio cartel that controls all the top shows and has tried to engineer me out of this business from day one, try to undermine me, steal my business, and get me out of this business. I am an underdog. That's number one. Number two, talk radio is about opinion. It is not a commercial for a president or a party. It never should have been and never would be. And when someone was doing this for Obama day and night, turning their show into a commercial for Obama, tell me what you said then. You were mortified by it. You were nauseated by it, weren't you? Well, we're supposed to sit here now? Whatever anybody says or does that is somewhat critical of Trump, the whole audience goes insane. They become so brainwashed they think it's fake news. What am I talking about? Yesterday I did a show called The Trump-Kim Summit is somewhere between Reagan and Chamberlain. It was the most brilliant possible take on what actually happened in Singapore. Nobody would link that story except, well, of course, it's on michaelsavage.com, but my good friend Chris Ruddy linked it to newsmax.com. He linked it, but there are other articles that looked it in the eye, by the way. And I saw other articles. A man named David Ignatius on Newsmax wrote, Kim gave up little in deal with Trump. Eli Lake wrote, linked on Newsmax, Trump treating Kim as a statesman contradicts previous disposition. But if I were to say some things like that, what would happen? The Trump bots would go insane. They'd call me a commie. They'd call me a socialist. They'd call me a liberal. They'd tell me I'm a Russian spy. They'd tell me I work for Mueller. The world has changed. There's no thought in the country anymore. There's no chance for opinion anymore. It's either or. Either you're with us or you're against us. It's become nothing but a barnyard storm. And that's where we stand today. This is Michael Savage, the outsider on the inside. And Hard But Fair is the name of a show in Germany. But, I thought about that. This is really hard but fair. And never forget, this is not a commercial for Donald Trump. It's not a commercial for Republicans. It's not a commercial for any politician. That's one thought I'm having. But looking at the De Niro meltdown, for example, whose movies I told you I boycotted since he started with his insanity. I used to love his movies. I couldn't get enough of him. I didn't care whether he was playing the tough guy or the comic guy. I liked him. I now boycott De Niro. I see him on the TV flipping by him. I think I go right by it because it's counted in the meter. Like, let's say you have Comcast cable and you stop on a movie. Well, of course, the computer counts how many times you hit it so they know what to program. I don't do it. I don't watch him. I don't watch Samuel Jackson. I used to think he was a pretty good villain in many ways. I don't watch him. I don't watch the other one. His car flipped over with the woman in the car, and then they gave him a God show, a 15-segment God show to cover it up. And just hear the guys, the cynics in Hollywood. Well, he's a big moneymaker. Car flipped over with a woman. Wait, how are we going to handle this? I got it. Let's get him a God series on Nat Geo. We'll take the earring out of his ear for that show, and he can walk around and talk about the world's religions. I boycott him. Who have you started to boycott since the primaries when you saw that they were stone-hearted racists or haters of America? Who did you find to be so obnoxious you don't watch them anymore, right? Now, many of you are calling already, thank God, on how you'd start in the country. What triggered this in me is interesting. I don't know what triggered it in me, but it's interesting. I thought about what would I do if I just landed here. My grandfather came here with nothing, came here from Russia. I wouldn't say nothing. I don't know what he had. I have no idea. The guy died at 47. I never met him. And he was a tailor, but a fine tailor. So I believe he wound up, I know he owned his own tailor shop in Manhattan. I have the address somewhere. And he started to make fine suits. He was actually he didn't just do cuffs. You didn't bring him in for an alteration like a cuff, like you do in Macy's if you buy a suit. My grandfather, Sam, made suits from whole cloth. And I understood later in life that he was very popular amongst the wise guys, the gangsters, the racketeers. They all had their suits made. I didn't know anything about it. I don't know why. He must have been a good suit maker. And that was interesting. He made good suits. They liked to dress well. They were sharp. The Italians, the Jews who were like wise guys all had their suits made. But, okay, so he then worked here, brought his family over. My father came when he was 7, came here in 1920, immigrant. What did he do? What did my father do? He went to high school. I don't know how far he went. I really don't know. Not much further than that. I hear stories. He was 7 years old. He was driving a laundry cart with a horse pulling it. I can't believe it. Like, what century is that from? My father always had a scar on his leg, like the knee, like a huge scar. Hey, Dad, how'd you get that scar? I don't. Then years later, they never told you anything. You had to, get it through, the grapevine. The horse bolted, pulled the laundry cart. My father fell off, the cart, and a spike went through his leg. He never talked about it. Not a big deal. This was life. This is what it was for immigrants. Welfare? Are you joking? First of all, it was limited. Number two, they would rather have thrown themselves off a fire escape than take what was called home relief. They had self-respect. They had pride. They'd rather throw themselves into the East River and drown than take a nickel from the city. Now compare that to what's coming into this country today. That's the opening to the show. Be here.